Pencil Retouch tool. The Pencil Retouch tool is a new tool from Harmony 25. It was introduced to complement Harmony 24's new pencil opacity feature. Harmony 24 allowed you to have varied opacity when you drew with your pencil tool. This meant that on top of having opacity in your color, you could also have opacity directly into your stroke, as such. This was cool and all, but once drawn, you were not able to edit the opacity in your line. Harmony 25 solved this with the new Pencil Retouch tool. So how does it work? Basically, you have your pencil lines and then you can just get the tool, and in the tool properties, you can have a lot of things that you can customize, such as the opacity, but also the thickness that you can adjust. So if I draw here, I'm gonna make my line thicker and thicker the more I draw over them. And you can also edit the opacity into the same way. It's pretty fun. Alright, so today I'm gonna show you how to use that tool. And to show you this, I'll be using one of my old Game Grumps animation. It's the one I did when I decided to turn them into rats, and they're up to shenanigans as usual. And if you want to check it out, I'll put the link in the description below. So, how does it work? First of all, disclaimer, this tool only works for the pencil lines. So if I draw anything with my brush tool, I will not be able to edit anything on it because, it's called Pencil Retouch tool, not the brush retouch tool. That would just be the eraser. You don't need a new tool for that, okay? So Pencil Retouch only for pencil lines. And where do you find it? It just sits there along the other editors. So you go where your contour editor is, the white arrow, you click on it, and then within the little gang here, you're gonna find the Pencil Retouch tool. Once you select it, if you head over to the tool properties, you're gonna see a lot of things to customize. So within the tool properties, you're gonna see the radius first. The radius, this is how large your nib will be, basically. If you get your cursor and you put it on top of this slider, it's also going to tell you what it does. And this is really important because that tool is amazing, but there's a lot of little technical things that are better known if you read through this. Of course, it's all into the documentation, but hey, having it just at the palm of your hand is also pretty useful. Alright, so it's going to appear wherever you touch within the slider, like here or here. These tooltips are very useful, so do read them. Tooltips is kind of how I taught myself how to use Harmony, so, they're pretty great. So for the retouch radius, what it says, it tells us that it's the size of the region that gets affected by the Pencil Retouch tool. One can change the radius using the O shortcut, just like any brush. And note, the radius is not pressure sensitive, and that is very important to understand. So the radius is the same no matter if you press hard or not. The maximum and minimum opacity that you change, or like the thickness, this will change depending on how you press. But not the radius, it is always the same size. So if I want to edit a large spot on my drawing, I get a bigger radius, and if I want a smaller, more precise thing, I just lower the radius. Then we have all these little icons there. What do they do? And there's so many, oh my god, I'm so scared. No, don't be scared, they're very easy and pretty straightforward. So first here, you have the choice to either affect the thickness or the opacity. And by the way, you can shift between those using the up and down key in your keyboard. So if I go here in my camera view and I press up and down, you see I'm going to alternate between my opacity and my thickness. So if I check the adjust thickness tooltips, it says the tool operates exclusively on the thickness of the pencil lines. Use the up down arrow to cycle between adjust thickness and just opacity. See, why am I here? And here you have the maximum thickness. So this is, the maximum thickness that will be applied if you press the hardest. And then this is the minimum amount of thickness that your tool is going to give you if you press as light as possible. The important note though is that the minimum thickness is a percentage of your maximum value, just like almost everything else into Harmony. And then this is the harder one, the thickness control point smoothing. So what does this do? Consider it kind of like a smooth for your process. So you know how when you draw with the pencil line, depending on if you have a lot of centerline smoothing or not, it's going to change how many vector points they are into your line. So here, if I draw something without any centerline smoothing, and if I draw it with, you're gonna see the difference in the amount of points. This is without, there's a lot of useless points, and this is with smoothing, and there is less vector points. So it's kind of basically the same technology within the Pencil Retouch tool. So it's kind of how many control point would it create inside your opacity or your thickness or whatever. Kind of like what you would see with the pencil editor too. When you look at the thickness, for example, if I take my Pencil Retouch tool and I do not a lot of control point smoothing, and I go and I play with the thickness, for example, if I look at my pencil editor and I look at these lines, look at how many control points there is. This is horrible, right? So if instead I had done the same thing, let me just Control Z. Yeah, if I had done the same thing, but instead I would have had a little more control point smoothing, and I do the same thing, I did the thickness. Now if I go look with my pencil editor, there's less points. And all I've just said applies just the same to the opacity. It's just easier to see it with the thickness because of the pencil editor tool. But yeah, so for opacity, it's the same thing. You have the maximum, the minimum, and the control point smoothing, which is the same thing as with the thickness, just applied to the opacity. So then on top of choosing if you adjust your thickness or your opacity, you also have 4 modes to choose from. There is increase, which is the one I've been using so far. You also have decrease, you have replace, and you have smooth. So as you can see here, it says smooth thickness, it also says replace thickness and decrease thickness. This is because I chose the thickness mode. But if I choose opacity, these 4 modes will just transform to adapt the opacity instead. Alright? And just like you can switch between the 2 modes here, you can also cycle between these with the left and right arrow key this time. So for adjust thickness and adjust opacity, it's up and down. And then for the little pencil mode, it's left and right. This is very useful if you want to switch between add and decrease. If you want to switch between increase and decrease, for example. So if I go get my thickness and my increase, and I increase the thickness of my line, if I regret, I can just quickly shift and go to the decrease mode. As you can see, the 3 sliders that I introduced you to, they do change between the little modes, but for the most part, it's the same. They just kind of change the naming. But yeah, I always recommend checking the tooltip for each of them to make sure you really understand what they do, because it's a super useful tool. Alright, so increase and decrease. And then you have the replace. So this is very useful if you want to change drastically like something. So if you want to remove all the thickness, for example, I can replace my thickness with 0, and then it's going to remove the thickness. This is very useful when you're trying to make like a style that has little holes in the line art. Super great. You also have the smooth, which is very useful after you've replaced the thickness by nothing. For example, you can use the smoothing to kind of even out everything, and it's very great. And finally, the final thing on this line is the apply to selection mode. So this is very cool because if I make a selection with the select tool, which you can do by clicking on the select tool, or let me teach you something great. If you're using any of the drawing tool, if you press Control or Command on a Mac, and then you make a selection, it's going to kind of switch to the select tool. As you can see here, I have my brush, as you can see with a little cursor, but if I press on Command or Control on a PC, it's going to switch to the lasso tool, which means that if you're using the pencil retouch tool, which is considered a drawing tool, so you press on Control or Command, and you make your selection, and then if you release Control, it's still selected, because there's a little orange line here. And then I can choose to go into the replace, maybe choose a thickness of 64.4, and then if I press on this little check mark, it will apply whatever I chose to this selection only, which is pretty great if you're trying to edit something precise like the eyes or the nose or anything. And then if I change it, it's going to apply like this. It works for replace, it works for smooth, it works for add, it works for all the different modes. And then last but not least, we have these 2 little buttons down there, super easy to use. So it's to choose if you want to apply this to 1 stroke or a bunch of strokes. So if I click here, it's going to apply to a single stroke. And if you look at the tooltip, it says, snaps to the first pencil stroke the tool is used on, allowing it to affect only a single stroke. Press and hold Shift to temporarily shift between single stroke and multiple stroke mode. So just like you can use the keyboard to switch between these modes and flavors and all that, you can also use the keyboard to shift between these 2. So that's the single stroke mode. So if I use it, I'm going to put my replace and I'm going to set it to a very big thickness so we see it. I'm only going to apply it to the first stroke that I click on. Oh, and by the way, sometimes when I use this tool, I do forget that I made a selection and then I try to do something and I can't. So sometimes like, you make a selection and then I forget that I made a selection and I try to do something else and it doesn't work. Don't forget to press on Control in anywhere just to, undo your selection, or you can also press on the escape button on your keyboard. Of course, make sure you're on the right layer. I was not able to edit this little hair piece because I was on the hand layer. Alright, so I'm just going to make sure I have the right layer, get my pencil retouch, set it to replace with 100 unit, set my single stroke mode, and if I click here, I'm only going to affect this specific stroke, even though I draw everywhere. But if I press and hold Shift, I'll be able to switch to the multiple stroke mode, and then if I release Shift, I'll go back to the single stroke mode. It's going to apply it only to the last stroke I chose. And here it's the opposite. By default, it's going to be multiple strokes, so I'm going to use the decrease this time, and it's going to apply to multiple strokes at the same time. So I'm just going to decrease it like this everywhere. And if I press on Shift and I hold, I'm only going to apply this to a certain stroke. And if I release, I'm going to go back to all my strokes. And now I'm just going to show you how I would use it on my scene, because now I've been using it on just one drawing. which is great to learn, but it's not what it would be into an actual production. So one way I would use this tool that is very useful is if I'm trying to make something thicker across all my animation. So I'm gonna use my adjust thickness. I'm gonna click on add, and I'm gonna set it to 50 just to try. And my minimum thickness will be like maybe it's gonna be like 10 because I want 10% of that. I'm gonna have a bunch of control point smoothing, and I want to apply it to multiple strokes at the same time. And now as my animation go, I'll be able to, for example, click and adjust the ponytail, for example, just making sure I'm on the right layer, getting my pencil retouch, and as I go, I'll be able to edit these little thing as I go. I'm changing my drawing with the F and G shortcut, and I'm making them thicker as I go. And this is very nice for small adjustments. I could also choose to do that with my opacity, so I'm going to remove the opacity as I go. And it's pretty nice. So I like to use this tool across my whole project after I've done my cleanup to adjust a few things. And I hope this was useful, and I'll see you again next week for more tutorials. Woohoo!